Now let's talk about why it's difficult to get pain to be the center of a conversation. And the first thing is that it's easier to leave pain on the side, meaning it's easier to not include it in your sales pitch. And let me explain why. So, what I think is that I think the majority of salespeople and business owners out there, I think they use a product selling sales pitch. And so, what that looks like is they talk about the company they work for, the product they sell, the features it provides, the pricing, and every conversation and message is really kind of focused on closing the sale. Even knowing they might not be a one call close type of product, it's always validating. Do you need this? Meaning, I sell this service and I want to schedule a meeting with you to discuss if you need this, right? So it's always trying to validate a need and interest and qualifying the step of purchasing moving forward. But anyways, if you look at that side, when I just went through that example of talking about an orthopedist medical services, I was actually going through those details. This is what we do, this is what we provide, and whatnot. So that's what I think most people do. And what we try to teach people to do is more of a consultative selling sales pitch. And so it focuses more on benefits. So yes, we'll talk a little bit about the product that we provide, but instead of talking about what the product does from like a feature functionality perspective, you can focus on how your product helps, the improvements that product helps the prospects to realize, the problems that product helps to resolve. And so the problems is another way of talking about pain points. So like when I'm talking with a prospect, I might use the word problems instead of pain. But when I'm talking with sales professionals, I talk about the word pain. So just a little tip there, that when I talk to a prospect, I won't say, do you have these pain points? I might say, some people like you often have problems or challenges like this. So just an FYI there, but problems equal pain. A consultative selling sales pitch focuses on asking good questions. I believe the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. I believe a sales pitch should be mostly built around good questions. A product selling sales pitch salesperson will think about, what can I say to explain what I sell and make this person interested. A consultative salesperson is going to say, what question should I ask to establish a conversation, to learn about this prospect, to see if they need what I have. If you differ in some sort of way from the other options out there, that's something good to highlight. Explaining how you have helped other customers is a good way to build interest. Explain what you do, establish credibility. If you deliver some sort of ROI, that's something good to highlight. And the goal of a consultative sales pitch is starting conversations, keeping conversations going, and keeping those conversations going until at some point maybe it makes sense to do business together. So that's kind of how we see the world. The reason why I go through that is that the left side is much easier than the right. Because if you think about it, if you're a business owner, if you're a salesperson, you already have all this knowledge in your head about the company, the product, the features, the pricing, right? So you don't have to think a whole lot when you pick up the phone and talk to someone, or you type out an email. It's easier. I'm not going to say it's more effective. And by the way, something more effective will ultimately be easier because you're going to be more successful and whatnot. But just out of the gate, with really just not having to think a lot, you can do what's on the left. And that's why the majority of business people out there, salespeople, do fall on the left side. The right side requires a little thought before you pick the phone, a little thought, just stopping selling for a couple hours or whatnot, and organizing your thoughts. So that's a little bit more difficult. So that's where you need to be on the right if you really want to focus more on pain, or it can help to be on the right to focus more on pain. So it's just a more difficult way to go. Now, when it comes to, I was just talking there about two different types of sales pitches, and really, regardless of whether you're on the left or the right, the way I see a sales pitch is, it's not just what you say when you're giving a presentation or when you're trying to close the deal. Your sales pitch impacts everything you communicate to your prospects. So that could be what you say on phone calls, voicemails, emails, when you're networking, social media, on your website. email marketing and whatnot. You could go out there and just say one sales pitch, and by the way, we're going to help you. What we're trying to do here is get your sales pitch to include focusing on pain. You could just go out there and just share one sales pitch with all your different customers. I think that's what probably most people do. But one thing that makes this complicated is that, sure, you could go out and say one sales pitch, but you might have multiple products. And so you might have product A, product B, product C. Well, those products might fix different problems. And so and resolve different pain points. So when you really start to dig into this, you could go out and just share one set of pain points for everybody you talk to, but you might end up coming up with a few different lists of pain points for the different products. And it kind of could get more granular than that, because let's just step back and say, okay, we're going to focus on one product. Then you have different types of buyers that you sell to. So you might be able to sell to manufacturers and retailers and medical organizations, and maybe they buy the same product, but you solve different problems for those different buyers. Just to give you an example here, like at one point in my career, I sold workforce management, scheduling, timekeeping software, and I could sell to manufacturers, retailers, and medical, and they would use that to manage their employees. And these different audiences had different types of employees. Manufacturers had assembly line, union, blue-collar workers. Retailers had college, high school students. Medical organizations had nurses and specialists and medical individuals that had all different certifications and skills. So these different buyers had different needs and they had different pain points. And I couldn't just, or I could go out there and just say the same pain points to all of them, but to really be that awesome salesperson, it would help me if I knew the individual pain points for those different industries. That would help me and help me to get to the next level. You could actually dig deeper than that, and you could say, well, when I'm selling into these organizations, I might be able to sell to different departments. And so when I might be able to sell into the IT department, but I could also sell into finance. And the CFO might have different pain points and interests than the VP of IT. So I might have a different set of pain points for those different departments. You could actually dig deeper. I'm not saying you need to, create all these different lists of pain points. Don't let me scare you. But I'm just saying the key takeaway here is that you might start out with one set of pain points and build your sales pitch around that. But once you get sophisticated, you might realize that there's different pain points that you bring up when you talk to different people. But even when you focus on one department, like let's say we're just focusing on IT, you might be able to talk to the VP of IT, an IT director, an IT manager, and at those different levels of an organization, they might have different interests. VP of IT might think more big picture, whereas an IT manager might, be more interested in technical pain. That's one thing that can make this difficult. And I just want to share a story with you, which is one of my jobs early in my career. I started working for a software company, and they put me through a formal sales training multi-day workshop that an external sales training company came in and provided us. And this company, it was probably more of a consultative selling approach, and they talked to me about pain. And it was my first exposure to that, because I think all the other sales training I had been exposed to before that was really product and solution selling. And so this company talked to me about pain. I thought it was fascinating. I thought, yeah, I mean, if I'm a doctor, I want to talk to a patient that either has pain or I want to find out what hurts. And if I can apply that to me selling and trying to sell solutions and sell software and sell my products, that makes sense. And I loved it. I ate it all up. And so I was in this workshop for 2 or 3 days, and I thought it was great stuff. But what I want to point out is that when I went back to my desk and I went from being a student and to being a salesperson, I was not anywhere closer to getting pain into the conversation. And part of the reason why was that sales training company, yes, they talked to me about pain, but they didn't tell me what pain points to focus on. And it's understandable, because if you look at this matrix here, it would have been difficult for them to give all of their different clients a list of pain points, because it's unique according to the products you sell and the territory you have and the different buyers you sell to. So that company didn't provide me a list of pain points, just like I'm not going to provide you a list here today. I will go one step further than that other company did, in that I'm going to give you a process that you can use after this training session. So you will have that to identify your pain points. But without that knowledge of, okay, what pain do I fix? And I was nowhere closer when I went back to my desk. And so that's one thing that can make it difficult is that you provide a lot of different pain. It can be difficult to figure out, well, what pain do I solve for the different audiences that I sell to? The fact is that prospects can either deny that they have pain, or they can be completely unaware that they have pain and that it's there. They might think everything's great. Let me give you an example. Regarding the denying pain, one of the first companies I started was an outbound cold calling lead gen business. And one of our clients provided a project management soft solution, right? So they helped to decrease project overruns in terms of budget and time. Now, I don't know whether if you've ever been involved in a project, or if you haven't, I know it's not difficult for you to realize that projects often, probably more often than not, run over in terms of time and budget. So we help to decrease that, and that's the value, is that my client helped to decrease the likelihood of projects running over in terms of time and cost. So that was a benefit that we offered. Now, if you think of that benefit, then the pain point that we help to decrease is projects running over on terms of time and cost. So what in our campaign, I thought a good question to ask when we were calling senior project managers would be, how concerned are you about projects running over in terms of time or budget, or how often are you experiencing projects running over in terms of time and budget? And where I'm going with this is straight to that prospects denying that they have pain, in that when we would call and we reach these senior level project executives, and when we even mention the topic of projects running over in terms of time or cost, they would deny it. And they would say, no, well, my projects don't run over. And because of a level of ego and a level of pride. And so what I thought was a great pain point and a great question, because, hey, we know projects run over, and it would be silly for someone not to be interested in that. What you end up with is selling to prospects that have an ego and level of pride, or they don't know who you are, and they just don't want to divulge information about internal challenges to someone they don't know, so they deny it. Or they deny it on purpose and say, no, I don't have those issues, or they might deny it because they don't know it's there, which is the second point here, which is they're not aware that pain exists. And so a different, much shorter example, which is one that I've already mentioned, which is, imagine driving your car, and your car has a nail sticking in your tire, and air is leaking, and you don't know it yet. But you could, if you stop to look at the tire, you could tell it's not fully inflated. If you were to take the tire pressure, you would know that it's a low tire. But you're driving the car and you just you're not aware of it. So it's very realistic that you might solve problems, your product or service might solve problems, and your prospect thinks everything is great and they don't know it. So that's a challenge. You would think in a perfect world that they know of all the problems that they have, and they would hear what you sell and they would want to buy it. But the reality is that they might not make that connection. So that's a challenge that you face with, how do you get them to become aware of that pain? And so that's one thing that can make it difficult. The other thing is that you don't have a whole lot of time to work with. And so if we look at sort of a spectrum here of having a lot of time to work with or having very little time, if you had a ton of time to work with, picture yourself being your typical psychiatrist type of setting, where you're sitting in an upright chair and your prospect's laying on sort of that couch in the office, and you have a pad of paper, and you're getting your prospect to tell you about all their problems and concerns, right? And you're talking to them for an hour, right? So that, if you could kind of convert that to a sales scenario, that would be great. You just have this long discovery, exploratory conversation, and you find out all the different pain that your prospect has, and that would be great. You could convert that to the real world of selling, which is a deep discovery conversation with a prospect. And that can be part of your sales process. The problem is that we're talking about generating leads here today. You don't have that long, lengthy, deep discovery conversation early in the process when you're trying to generate a lead. That's at one far end of the spectrum. If we look over at the other end of the spectrum, which is you cold calling a prospect, sending an email, or talking to someone at a networking event, or having just an initial contact of some sort with a prospect, you don't have an hour. You don't have that attention. You don't have that time. You have like 2 to 5 minutes if it's a phone call. And you convert that to less time than that than if you're sending an email, right? You have a paragraph or a paragraph to a paragraph of half of text to work with in an email. So you just don't have time to work with. So that can be challenging if you want to try to either find out the pain that your prospect has or talk to them about the pain you fix. So you really have to be efficient. So that was one thing that I experienced when I left that training workshop in my career, where I was like, I got to talk about pain. I have to find out what pain my prospect has. And then I get on the phone and I'm doing outbound prospecting, and I realize, how in these really short conversations, how am I going to figure out the pain that they have where they don't know me and I don't have the time to get to know them or the time to ask a whole bunch of questions?